don't want to be on camera, then to add your questions in the chat and I can read them out loud for you. Pam, do you want to take us through case study 1?
Yeah, thank you. And let me just express to you my deep concern and my sadness at what you've gone through. I understand it because that happened to me several years ago. In 2017, I went to bed at 11 o'clock one Sunday night, tucked my kids into bed. I have 3 kids. And I knew there was a fire in our neighboring county. I knew there was a fire out in 25 miles away in a neighboring county, and 3 hours later, my neighborhood burned down because of the crazy winds that were occurring, and that was in October. I live in Santa Rosa, California. It's part of Sonoma County. We are 1 hour drive north of the Golden Gate Bridge, to orient you, and that was just devastating. I left in my car. I heard, we woke up at 2 a.m. and my husband had woke up first. Everybody got out of here. It's a miracle that more people didn't perish in that fire because we had no warnings at all. But it was so noisy and so loud, and there was so much cars exploding and things that we got out of town. So I rebuilt. I'm sitting in my rebuilt home. This is my family room. It's a lot of work, but I want you to know that you can do this, that you can come back, and it's a slow, long road, but you can do this. And you're going to do it because you're going to do it together. And that's what we did. Our neighborhood worked together really for the long haul. And that's what I want to offer to you is a really good way to do it. I can't see the slides anymore. Do you still see the slides?
Yeah, it looks like someone who was screen sharing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, do you guys see it now?
Okay. So in a sense, our fires were very similar in duration, in impact, and yours burned even more homes than ours, but really devastating and also so fast. The next slide. Go to the next slide. Lorraine wanted me to touch on who lives in Coffee Park, whose house is burned down. Fires do not care if you're rich or poor. Fires devastated every segment of our county and our city, and so people were outside the city limits and inside the city limits. They lost their homes. 2 hospitals were evacuated that night, and oh boy, I used to know the percentage, but so many of our doctors lost their homes. Our doctors often had homes in the Fountain Grove area, which was more affluent. So I know our kid's pediatrician lost his home, and we talked to him a lot during the rebuild process. And so many of of those burned. But Coffee Park is a lower to middle income neighborhood. I was at the time a junior high teacher. My husband teaches at the community college. We had the firefighters, the police officers, everybody that makes the city run. Those are the kind of people that lived in my town. We had a 1,800 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house that was built in 1987. That's my part of the neighborhood. Some houses were one level, more like 1,200 square feet and built in the 70s, but and 40% of these homes in our area were in Coffee Park were rentals. So the people next door didn't own the house. They were renters. Their house burned down. They lost everything. We owned our house. The neighbor on the other side of me loaned their house. Everybody's situation is different, and that's not going to change. You each have a different situation, your personal situation, your family situation, your insurance, and all those things. So each of you are going to be facing personal decisions based on what's available to you in this rebuild process. And so it's not a one size fits all. And you may experience this too. We had architects and journalists and I don't know, all kinds of people coming out of the woodwork telling us how we were going to rebuild our neighborhood. And we were like, we're all individual homeowners. We get to each make our own decisions. So I don't know why you think we're going to all do the same thing, you know? So, but as a group, we did gather information and figure out what our options were. And that was really important. We can go to the next slide.
I've been clicking. It's going to take a minute. Sorry, guys.
Oh, sure. Yeah, this shows you the different types of houses and and there was also trailer park that held a senior citizen trailer park that completely perished too. So we had all kinds of housing that was lost, but Coffee Park was one of the lowest hanging fruit as far as the building community was concerned to rebuild, because our neighborhood was flat. Fountain Grove was on a hillside. Pretty much we could look up records of our houses because it was only, they were only 30 years old, and we could figure out how to rebuild and come up with some kind of plan for rebuilding. And then our county supervisor helped us and gave us a model to organize as neighbors to work together. And we worked together diligently for years. And that is really, since then we have been interviewed by international news and every, I don't care, every single fire subsequent to ours, and people want to know the model for how we organized our neighborhood, and it worked. So if you ever want to talk to me about that, I can tell you about that too. But it helps to have a communication plan and an information structure to help people work together. And so, believe it or not, our neighborhood is almost completely rebuilt. It's not completely rebuilt because some lots got sold, and then the people who bought them decided not to do it. So it wasn't like somebody said, "Oh, I just can't rebuild my house." They decided to leave. That's one choice. You're like, I can't go through this. I'm old. I don't want to spend the rest of my life building a house. I'm going to go move somewhere else. So there are some empty lots left, but most of our houses are rebuilt, and they're all different. They really are quite different. It doesn't look like a tract neighborhood anymore.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pam. I think we'll definitely have to leverage some of your knowledge during the Q&A.
Okay.
Awesome. So Jordan, we're coming up on case study 2. I've clicked, but Google's just taking some time.
While that's coming up, because we're going to be discussing hazardous waste abatement, I want to make a few things clear, which is that the materials that are on these sites, asbestos, lead, and ash, are all toxic materials, but not all toxic materials are made the same. We breathe asbestos, for example, every day. It's in the air from our car brake linings. Those particles are potato chip shaped, and they're not dangerous to us. But the type of asbestos that has fallen into this debris is friable asbestos. It's shaped like a fish hook, and it gets into your lungs, and it just cuts up your lung tissue, and it never goes away. Similarly, all ash is toxic, but ash that's laden with heavy metals more toxic than others. And lead is not good in any way, shape, or form to be ingested. So when people have gone into their homes to retrieve their possessions before the EPA has done their work, they're shuffling around in a pretty toxic environment. It's not a great place to be. When the EPA is done, there will still be quote unquote toxins on your site outside of your ash area. So it's important to kind of understand what's going on out there and what you should do. In the case study on Maiden Lane, we have a house that looks like many that we see in Altadena today. A house is burned to the ground. We see a standing chimney. We see a burned tree. When the EPA comes in, they're sort of taking this low-hanging fruit. and they're going to remove the toxic materials that we see on the site. As the list says, they're going to take things such as gas, bleach, propane tanks, etc. They'll be consolidated and taken away. Any batteries that have burned are also going to be removed. They're doing that in a rather short period of time because what they have to do versus what the Army Corps has to do is fundamentally different. We can go to the next slide. So the Army Corps is in charge of what we call phase 2. In phase 2, it's not actually the Army doing the work. They're contracting local EPA certified debris removal companies. They're contracting with local companies that perform hazardous testing and monitoring. And they are going to initiate their phase of removal based partly on first come, first serve, but actually mostly on whether or not they can get entire neighborhoods to opt in to the removal process. This will make their operations much more efficient. It will prevent them from running heavy equipment all over town in a whack-a-mole approach. And when they do come, tonight we're trying to give you an idea of what's going to happen. The Army Corps will first ask you to sign a right of entry form. Now, the right of entry form, as many of you probably know, just gives them the legal right to come onto your property. However, you can, at that time, ask them to isolate things that you might want to keep. Your chimney, for example, might be something that you want to maintain so you have time to salvage architectural tiles off of it. There might be some aspect, but you will become responsible for it later. But you do have the right to sort of isolate objects that you don't want them to remove. The heat in this fire was so intense that it deformed the crystal structure of the reinforcing steel in the foundation, and they're no longer suitable to carry the load of a house. The removal process is, frankly, just a large piece of equipment ripping those foundations out of the ground. And when they circle this ash footprint, they're going to end up removing 6 inches of soil, presumably to remove toxins such as lead and asbestos that fell within the immediate perimeter of the home. Any trees that are marked as dead or dying will be looked at by an arborist. If they're in the zone of the ash footprint and they're determined to be a clear and present danger to the salvage personnel, the trees will be removed. Similarly, the chimneys, which are typically unreinforced masonry and have also gone to 3,000 plus degree temperatures, will also probably be removed because they're unsafe, if they determine it's unsafe. And so when they remove the cars and they remove the chimneys and they cut down the trees and they pull out the foundations and they scrape 6 inches off the soil, you're just going to have like an area that's a dirt lot. And that would be the end of their work. However, the rest of your lot might have burned trees that are not a clear and present danger, burned fences, spas, pools, driveways. They will not be removing anything outside of the quote unquote ash footprint. That's going to be the homeowner's responsibility. And that kind of gets to the first thing that you will have to consider in the rebuilding process, which is that you have essentially another cleanup process to consider. And you also have a dirt pad that's unsuitable to build a building. You're going to have to get a grading contractor who will excavate 3 feet below the future footings and recompact that back up. It's typically about 5 feet deep. So we call that a removal and recompaction. And so that's something that goes right to the heart of the next step in this process, which is designing your home, because you're going to have to determine where this new home will be. And that's where you would direct your grading contractor to recompact and begin the process. So I'll turn it over to Lydia at this point so she can talk about how that process goes once the Army Corps is finished.
Right. So, I mean, there's two directions. One is you rebuild what you had before. You can make some slight modifications. The county will allow you to make modifications to make your new house more fire safe. And that includes like creating more of a setback between you and your neighbor, or different materials, and even pushing the location of your house on your property. So you can do a rebuild, which is called a like for like, or you can build a new home that's a new custom home. So what I was focusing on here was more rebuilding a like for like. If you decide that you want to completely build a completely different house, then I definitely would recommend getting an architect. But if you wanted to do a like for like, you can also, I just wanted to let you know that you don't necessarily need an architect to draw plans for you for, especially for a rebuild. But in order, as a good starting place, I was recommending that you pull your original permits from the county office on, Baldwin in Arcadia. And that will tell you what the county had on record for what your house was like. And then also to pull your assessor's building records. And those records had little drawings that showed the basic dimensions so that you have a general idea of what the footprint of your house was originally. So, and I'm suggesting to do that as a starting point. And these records are important because when you submit your plans first to the planning department, that's what they're going to ask for. They want to see what you had before, and this is what they reference. So you can hire an architect, or some general contractors also draw plans, or also you can hire a designer, or you can hire a draftsman to redraw your house plans. And then the first step would be, once you have those plans, at least the site plan, the floor plan, and the elevation, is to submit those drawings to the planning department. And the county has said that they will expedite. There is a way to do this all online on Epic LA, and you submit this online, and you know that you are referencing the Eaton fire, that your house was destroyed in the fire. And then while that's getting approved, you can start working to further develop your plans by having an engineer do the structural design of your house. And so you would take those plans and the structural drawings and submit that to the building department for your building permit. And then that's also when, right, Jordan, that you can also start getting bids from contractors. Yeah, and then, I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, I was going to say, I didn't know if you were pausing. You wanted me to jump in. A contractor is always going to give you a bid that is relative to the completeness of your drawings. You can have a napkin sketch, and I often do as a contractor receive essentially a schematic drawing of what someone might want to do. And we can apply unit costs to that and come up with an estimate, but we typically refer to that as a rough order of magnitude. The more detailed the plan is, especially if it's going into plan check or is coming out with a permit, the more accurate the bid. So when you engage a contractor or ask for pricing when the plans are in a more primitive condition, you have to understand that there's variables. There's, it might be 20% more or 20% less than the contractor thinks it should be. But as you get towards that close completion of the drawings, the bid becomes a lot more accurate, up to the point where it can be turned into a contract.
Right. And I guess just to conclude here too, so it's if it's important to hire a licensed architect and a licensed contractor if you're going to go that route, because they can bring a level of professionalism and knowledge to your project, and you won't, you won't have to worry about what's the quality of what you're getting, and there's some control over the cost and the materials. So I think that's it for this section.
Yeah, and just to add, there's a source data tab that we'll go through at the end. It's also important to go with the licensed contractor for insurance reasons as well. And so at the end, we'll go through some of the source data, and there's a questionnaire that Pam has provided us of what they used when they were bidding out contractors. And one of those questions is about their insurance.
I think something I'd like to emphasize here, and maybe Pamela can comment on it, is that we're currently under the federal mandate, and the EPA is in control of Altadena. As soon as the EPA is done, the government is no longer in control of Altadena. If you've opted in with the Army Corps of Engineers, you are in control of your property. And what I'd like to emphasize here is that the process of rebuilding starts with this educational component and gathering data that Lydia just discussed, going and familiarizing yourself with going to the planning department and be patient. It's complicated, but it can be done. Going to the assessor's office and getting additional information and beginning the process to envision which kind of home you want, whether you're going to perform this work as an owner builder or whether you're going to hire an architect. This is something you can start now. You can start now. The only impediment to actually starting construction is the county's clearance after the Army Corps is finished, because the EPA and the Army Corps, when they're all done with getting rid of all of the heavy toxic materials, sends that information over to the building department, and if your permit's ready to issue, you're ready to go. So this is a process you can start now, and so that brings us to the timeline. And I'd like to hear what Pamela has to say, because she went through this in real time.
Hi, thank you. I am not sure on this call how many of you don't have insurance, are underinsured. I was underinsured to rebuild my house. I had to take out a second mortgage for $250,000 to complete the contract with my builder. So you may be in a similar situation. That limits your options. I'm just going to put it bluntly. You only have so much money to rebuild that house. The one thing I wanted to say about the debris removal process is you will be responsible to cover the cost of debris removal that is reimbursed by your insurance. So you got to look at your insurance policy. If you have insurance, I'm sure you've already made a claim. There is going to be a bucket on there. All the insurance policy has buckets. there's going to be something on there for debris removal. And this can really sting you if you don't know this in advance. You may have $50,000, $100,000. I don't know how much money is on your policy for debris removal, but you need to reimburse the county for that. And the bill's not going to come for about 2 years. So you need to take that money and you need to put it in an account and not touch it. And the folks who preceded us with a fire in Lake County in 2015 were not clear on that. And a lot of people got into really difficult financial trouble because they had already spent that money. Okay, so debris removal, you won't be responsible for the whole bill as long as it happens like ours. The bill was a ridiculous amount of money, actually. It was crazy. It was like $150,000 for my tiny lot. I only had to reimburse the amount that my insurance covered. The rest was taken care of by the public, okay? The other thing is a bespoke custom home is expensive. You may need, depending on your personal situation, to go with a production builder that is going to offer your neighborhood. It's a little early in the process, but it could be in a month or two. There's going to be a home builder who says, we've designed 5 models for Altadena. So you don't get to customize a lot of stuff, but it's probably going to have a package where they're going to do some of that land, like preparing the land. And they may, my builder offered to take out those extra trees that weren't taken by Army Corps. So take a look at that. If your financial situation is such that you don't have as many options. I downloaded an example of a house plan that I liked from online, and then my builder works with an architect, a licensed architect, who looked at it and then drew something based on that. That was a savings, you know? So you're gonna have to look for options that are different savings. The other thing is you have to be aware, because there are gonna be some builders that are basically crooks. And that are, no, my neighbor across the street lost $170,000 to a builder who is now in jail. And they were one of the 100 people signed with this builder. So you just need buyer beware, go very slowly and really vet. Don't just look at the California CSLB, look up their license, look on Yelp. Find out if you can talk to people who have houses that this builder has built before, and really do your homework before signing with a builder. When you get to the point where you're going to do contract, have a lawyer look at the contract. Don't sign anything without getting experts looking at things to see if your interests are protected in that agreement. That's a long-term relationship with a builder. You're going to be working with this person for a long time. And it's your home and your biggest investment of your life. So make sure you're protecting yourself in every bit of that. I feel like I might have gone all over the place, but those are the things at the top of my mind.
No, those are questions I think people are going to have for sure. So any insight I think is super helpful.
I'd like to add some of my own experience after the Northridge quake. You know, what Pamela is saying is true. I think the first thing people have to square themselves with is that they're coming against a very challenging task where you don't have enough resources. You're also facing a timeline where if you don't get back into your property, your rental assistance runs out, you're paying a mortgage and a rent, and a lot of people will just simply not be able to tolerate that. So your strategy has to account for this constraint of resources. And you have options. This option of a builder coming in and essentially doing a subdivision in a neighborhood is an option. Being an owner builder, if you're able to, cut through all the paperwork and be patient, is a way to rebuild. You might put a trailer on your property so you can move back onto your property and avoid paying that second rent. In California, you're actually allowed to camp on your property for 6 months out of the year, so you can throw up a tent. I don't recommend a campfire, but you may, the county is allowing people to build an accessory dwelling structure in advance of the main structure. So instead of paying rent, you might be investing in a structure that might help you recover costs over the long term. And then, of course, there's the approach of the white box, where you focus on what we describe as the core and shell of your home, the basic architecture, the flow, the windows, and inside it's just vanilla. And you build that out and you improve that over the long term. But your strategy is to get back on your property. Your strategy is to figure out how to manage this task. I mean, most people have never built a home in their lives, and they weren't expecting to. So it's a fast study, but this is the most important thing you need to focus on: your strategy to move forward.
Amazing.
There's, do you mind? I was going to say, maybe you have knowledge about this too, about when you do your insurance claim, you're going to have to submit to your insurance how much it would cost to have built the exact same house. And my builder did that for me to do an estimate based on the plans of what it would have been to build that exact same house. And the other thing to know about a builder that's very different from building a subdivision is the builder has to front the money in advance. They are reimbursed for their expenses. And this is some of our builders who had the biggest hearts and the biggest intentions, and local builders went bankrupt because they couldn't pay the labor and materials in advance. They ended up taking on more work because they wanted to help a lot of people, and it put them in financial distress. So you have to look at, does this builder actually have money in the bank to pull this off, is another thing to think about.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because on the contractor's license test, one of the core concepts they try to convey to you is that contractors don't go out of business because they don't have enough work. Contractors go out of business because they take on too much work. And in this situation, you have a lot of homes that are local, and the danger is that a contractor is going to go out there and overextend himself. He's going to take deposits, he's going to get going, and the next thing he knows, he's playing a shell game where one job is commingling with another, and then finally, like a pyramid scheme, that collapses. Maybe he leaves town and leaves everyone holding back. So when you're vetting your contractor, you have to make sure he or she is not biting off more than they can chew.
And
how many projects they have is
yeah. If that happens, they're going to beg you for money, and it is in your contract that you do not give them money until certain things are completed. And we saw people so desperate to get into their house that they gave them the money before that contractual agreement was complete, and that money, that was lost money. Okay, so you don't want that to happen to anybody, but it's a big decision, and so don't go fast. That's all I can say. There is a timeline, and I want to just tell people that we in Sonoma County fought to change the law. We used to have 2 years of rental assistance, and we fought to change the law. So now the insurance company has to give you 3. So just so you know, we lobbied and we rallied and we fought in Sacramento, and the law changed because we needed more time. So at least you have that little bit of extra time.
Yeah.
Amazing. Feeling very, very hopeful after hearing that. Thanks, Pam and Jordan and Lydia. I'm gonna, and just so everyone understands, this slide is really just to hit home that, you can start the planning and the planning process now, and with the steps that we highlighted earlier. So next we have our Altadena Residents Impact Survey led by Layla.
Hi, everyone. Apologies for the background here. Thanks for having me, Lorraine. I just wanted to take a minute before you dive into your question and answers I understand the weight of the conversation. Our firm, the Future Organization, is based in Northwest Pasadena. Started in 2018. We serve nonprofit and government. We're a social research consultancy. So we do a lot of research, program design, strategy. We have released a pro bono public interest survey to basically help to tell the story of what happened before, during, and after the Eaton fire in the context of the government's response, and also to help communicate in a unified voice your hopes and expectations for the restoration of Altadena. So I've put a QR code here. There's also a link. I can put one in the chat after I go off camera. We have about 500 participants so far, and we're aiming for 1,000 because we want it to be statistically reliable and have a lot of weight. I just wanted to add that it is quite lengthy. We did review it with folks who suffered total loss or cannot be in their homes, who were directly impacted, to get feedback. We massaged it as much as possible. It's for renters and homeowners, and we're looking for a diversity of perspectives to really tell the story of the community. It's pro bono, public interest. Nobody is sponsoring this. We're doing it as committed members of the community. Does anybody have any questions before I let you go back to the main topic?
What are you doing with the findings?
We're going to put together a report based on the findings, and we're going to let the community decide how they're going to use it. We will be available to answer questions, present on the report, but it will really be us as objective researchers communicating what the research says.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. So we encourage you to share it. Don't do it unless you have time to sit there for 15 or 20 minutes from start to finish, because we put some firewalls on it so that people can't duplicate their responses and or do, multiples. So thank you so much.
For sure. Thank you so much for even offering to do an impact survey. If I remember correctly, this could also be used by news organizations nationally, maybe even policymakers, just to see what the data says. So the more representation, it seems like the better. I'm like so proud of everyone. We are literally at almost the 45-minute mark for Q&A. At the end of the Q&A, I will be sending a meeting survey just so we can get some feedback of how can we improve, what else is outstanding that you guys would like us to update you on, and or if you would desire another meeting, like what topics we should cover. So far we have some questions in the chat, and I would love Lydia and Jordan for you to answer, and then also Pam, if you could also give some of your experience. Can you address how to navigate potentially unpermitted structures, which Altadena has a lot of, in the rebuilding process? So I think a lot of us, especially with generational housing and bigger lots, have had maybe some ADUs that were unpermitted, or just some work that's been done on the house that may not be with the county.
Yeah. I did ask them, I asked the planning department how they're going to address that. And they said they were non-committal, but they did say that they will try to work with property owners. It's going to be on a case-by-case basis. So I think it's worth asking or showing them what you had in some form, like whether it's in a floor plan or photos, or whether the assessor's records captured it. But it's worth trying to get it rebuilt and improved.
And when you say they, like who's they? Like, let's say.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the planning department, the planning counter. And so in that case, I would recommend going to the Arcadia office. And their hours are in the morning. I think it's like 8 to 11, and actually talking to a planner at the counter and saying, showing them what you have or asking them if you don't have any form, have any way to draw it out, at least talking to them and just trying to see for your particular case how they're going to respond. Because it's really, it depends on how much was built without a permit. But I mean, just so you know, it's like every property that I've ever worked on in Altadena has had something that was not permitted on it.
I would also add that if you had an unpermitted ADU, you can permit the ADU in the rebuild. And the county has not pre-permitted, but pre-approved plans. Some of them are 1,200 square feet, so these can be pretty sizable if you have a lot to accompany it. You can rebuild and build to that exact plan. It's already got all the Title 24 energy requirements, the engineering, the floor plan, and the types of materials you can use. So you can sort of customize something like that. And that's a fast way to get into an ADU if that's going to be your first structure before you rebuild your primary structure, or if that structure is going to be built afterward. But the point is that if you had an ADU that was unpermitted before, this is an opportunity to build an ADU that's fully permitted.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Does anyone and feel free to unmute yourself before we move on to the next question if there's a follow-up question on this.
I had a follow-up question. I think it has to, well, it might be in the chat, but regarding the ADU, if you have we had a separate garage space, 2-story garage that was that we lost in the fire. It was substantial, 1,200 square feet, or about 1,300 both floors. We were talking about turning that into an ADU on one floor, so at least we could move in early. But I'm hearing, let's see, Stephanie wrote the county is going to have a one-stop permitting setup. Does that mean that you can't submit like a plan to turn a garage into an ADU first and then the house? Does that make sense?
No, I think you can, as long as you're going for the ADU, then I think you're fine.
And would you think that's a good strategy time-wise?
Sorry, I didn't understand. It wasn't damaged?
No, it was completely damaged. It's all gone.
Oh, okay.
But we did have, I mean, we had this, the foundation. Well, I don't know what's left. I mean, nothing's left. But
Yeah,
but where it wasn't an ADU, it was a garage.
Okay.
But it was a 13 square, it was huge.
Right.
But we would like to make one floor of it an ADU.
Well, I think that's what the county supervisor has pushed the building department to do, because an ADU typically is smaller, and it's typically not as well appointed as the main house. But also, as current code stands, you can't have an accessory dwelling unit unless you have a primary dwelling unit. So by inverting that and allowing people to build the accessory unit, it probably helps them in this equation we were discussing, where you're waiting for that second bucket of money. Maybe it's the SBA loan, maybe it's the recovery from the fire litigation, maybe it's winning the lottery, whatever. But you can, because you might have the resources for it, build that garage and put that ADU and then live in it until the main structure is built. So that is a viable strategy if you have the place for it. Absolutely. Okay,
because we asked our contractor, and he was going to look into it. Somebody that we've worked with before, he said he wasn't sure if he had to, he was going to follow up on it. So, okay.
Can I mention one thing? The thing about working together as a neighborhood, many of you may have similar questions that need answers. And if you can organize yourself to gather those questions and have a representative ask the city, so that planning office doesn't have a line of 25 people asking the same question. No, I'm very, very serious about this, because
you're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Of rebuilding is on the backs of the staff getting that job done. We met with the city and the county every week, and they sent staff every week, and we asked them these questions, and then we were able to disseminate amongst ourselves the answers. And often they didn't know the answer because they never had to make that decision before. But having those regular meetings meant that they could consider an option that didn't exist before. And it happened. And there can be ordinances, emergency ordinances that your county officials can enact to alleviate some of these pressures. So I always say, rebuilding after a fire is a lesson in civics, and you need to be working side by side with these people who are either approving or not approving your plans, because it takes the local government, the survivors, and the business community, the builders, and then the insurance companies. You're all in this together. So I recommend gathering questions like this. You know, I have a friend who lost a couple homes on her property, and they bought a fifth wheel and lived in it for 2 years till they had one of the houses rebuilt. Then they moved into that one, and then they built the other one. They had a little larger property. It was a little bit more rural than mine. It was further out of town, but you can figure out how to make it work.
I would add to that by observing that the city of Los Angeles, who normally contracts fire and sewer through the county, has deftly parlayed the plan check for all of the Palisades fire over to the county. So the county is not just plan checking unincorporated Los Angeles County, it's also going to be plan checking every home that burned in Palisades. So it's an enormous workload. When you go there in the morning, as Lydia was describing, those are counter hours. In the afternoons, they do the actual plan checking, and it's a first come, first serve. And really what Pamela is saying is true. If you can organize yourself and sort of ask these questions, you know, it's going to be more efficient, not only for you, but it's going to be more efficient for the county.
Yeah, I also like that for the fact of, I feel like just telling people, you have to go do this, and we're telling there's 70 people on this call. Everyone goes to the county's office tomorrow. It's a lot.
Yeah, no, it's a great idea.
Margaret, did we answer all your questions?
Yes, I guess, I totally understand that. Makes sense. I mean, of course, the questions are, you know, how do you gather all these people together that you don't know? We weren't an intimate street or neighborhood.
No, we weren't either. You know what? There is a Slack group, I believe, that is starting to organize in Altadena. I don't know if anyone here are in a Slack group.
Well, I'm also getting, you know, and I think people from like next door, like next door James Village and other groups are, you know, people are wanting to share contractors and that kind of information. It feels, I can't even wrap my head around that aspect of it yet, but
it's early, but it's not too early actually.
But my guess then, like, let's say for example, I'm the representative from my street. Then if with my questions, who do I call?
Yeah, I think there's two groups that are forming that I can. It seems like almost a majority of everyone that's on this call has actually emailed me. So what I could do after the call is send a follow-up to people on the Facebook group and via email if people feel comfortable to give this information. And this is also part of the form that I pinned in the channel or in the messages. So if people fill out this community form, we will hold your information and also send you guys information like this if this is what you guys are requesting. So I can send that after, if that's okay.
I think so.
Awesome. These are great questions. I know we have some hand raised. Margaret, did you have any other follow-ups?
No, I have a question on a different topic that I definitely want to get addressed. It has to do with the foundation being left or not left in phase 2.
Mm-hmm. So
I'm happy to address that. This is not an ordinary fire event. It's not always the case that if your house burns down, you have to remove your foundations. But this was like a fire tsunami. And The foundations that are exposed, such as raised foundations, are just inherently more vulnerable. Foundations that are in the ground, perhaps less vulnerable. It is the part of the work of the EPA to determine if the foundations have been adversely affected. You are at great risk leaving your foundation if it's damaged, because if you have to tear it out later, it's going to be really expensive. And although it's not appetizing to have it torn out and you know, have to put it back in and do this grading operation, it'll be less appetizing if you have to do it yourself if you discover that the foundation during your plan check process is no longer suitable. So before you opt out of having the Army Corps not remove your foundation, I'd get an engineer over there and get an independent opinion if you like. But for the most part, in these areas where whole neighborhoods have burned down, the foundations are no longer suitable for what they were intended. In areas along the perimeter, perhaps it's different. So not every case is the same. Not everybody burned as hot as the guy next door. So it's not a one size fits all. You really have to take it, like everything, on a case by case basis. But proceed with as much knowledge as possible. You don't want to be caught having to tear your foundation out later because you can't prove that it works anymore.
Okay, what if you did already opt out and you change your mind before they've come? Can you change it on the form?
It's the right of entry form. If you want to leave something in place, it's on your right of entry form.
Right, isn't that the form you fill out when you're
I don't know.
opting for them to remove your?
Correct. She's asking, she's already filled out her form and she opted out of removing the foundation. If she would like to opt back in to remove the foundation, do you know if there's any way to make amendments to the form?
I did speak to Colonel Evidence about that at a disaster forum and said, well, what if someone opts out and opts in? But we were really talking about fully opting out or fully opting in. And the process isn't friendly to completely opting in and out. But if you've just put it like, leave my foundation, when they show up in your neighborhood, they're bringing all the equipment. So I would go talk to them. You can contact them by email or contact the county and say, you know, if I change my mind about my foundation, you know, I opted in, but I said, leave the foundation, you know, can I change that? And they'll tell you. They've been very responsive when I've emailed them.
I believe on the process is that they give you 24 hours notice before that they're going to come to your property.
Right.
And like Jordan said, they do allow individuals to come watch the process from afar. But I do believe that there's a number that you can call. So let me research that for you, Margaret, and get back to you if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, because I'm feeling like that maybe was a misstep.
Especially with if the garage and your home were very much affected, it seems like there could be a lot of heat to the foundation. So it's good.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
it's
think
something you don't
I
even
would
see.
like to
You know?
add something that I talked to the building department, the inspector, and he told me that they will only allow a foundation to remain if an engineer signs off on it. So you have to have somebody that will come and review it and take responsibility for it being viable. So he did say that for the most part, they're expecting almost all of the foundations to be taken out.
Interesting. Good to know.
Yeah, correct. A structural engineer.
Yeah, or a civil engineer can do it, but they just have to be licensed again.
Yeah, I mean, the inherent problem is, unlike a structural failure where someone could look at the soil conditions and the physical evidence of the foundation, this is something that is deformed in the crystalline structure of the steel rebar. So you have to do extensive testing. You have to cut open parts of the foundation, take the rebar out, saw it in half, sending it to a testing agency. So it's a lot bigger climb than just a normal, like, hey, you know, my foundation sank over here, what should I do?
Got it. And so that's really helpful. So we're about at 8 o'clock, or we have about 30 more minutes. Sonia, I see that your hand is up, but we also have some other questions in the chat. So we'll definitely get to you. The next question is, if you don't rebuild like for like, what are additional hurdles?
Yes, so if you build a completely different house, then you have to comply with all of the current codes, zoning codes in terms of setbacks, height restrictions, location on the property, parking requirements. So it kind of pushes you into a more onerous permitting process.
So does that mean that the permitting process would not be expedited if you're not building like for like?
That's a good question. They didn't, at the time, they didn't really have when I asked, they didn't really have a good answer on that. They just said that they would be reviewing, you still would submit your plans as if with this statement that your original building was destroyed in the Eaton fire, but it really depends on what you're doing. Like, for example, if you had originally like a little 600 square foot house and then you're putting in now, a 2,500 square foot 2-story building, then yeah, the process would take longer to review that.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand there's no grandfathering going on if the houses have been seriously damaged. And you are going to be building to the new codes. And furthermore, I'm going to a seminar that the county's holding this Thursday and Friday where they're meeting with architects and engineers, and they're brainstorming how to expedite the process to get this moving faster. What type of materials should they reconsider? What kind of new codes should they implement to harden those structures? So it's a moving target in a sense in terms of the building department's response to how they're going to deal with the new building codes. But anyone's house who is burned to the ground, you will be subject to the new building codes. I think what Lydia is saying, if you're building like for like, you might catch a break on things like your original setbacks, etc.
Well, there was some discussion that they might waive some of the energy requirements because that can add to the cost of rebuilding. So but that's still in discussion.
Yeah,
I don't have an answer on that yet.
In our situation, and I know that our county officials went down to give advice to LA, so maybe it had influence, is that they told us, well, if you use the same footprint, it's not like you had to have the whole house be the same. But if you really didn't change the footprint of the house,
right,
it would be much quicker.
And you're allowed to add about 10%.
Yeah.
10%,
Yeah. And the other thing is something that you can use when you're advocating for your own rebuild. And we use this. I'm only trying to get back what I had.
Yes.
When you say this to the officials, to the insurance company, to the media or whatever, I'm trying to get back home. I'm trying to get back what I had. We're not trying to get a windfall out of this recovery. This is what we have. And the other thing is, do call the media. Stay in the news. Stay in the news for the long haul. It will help you in the long haul. Do not let the next disaster usurp the attention on the needs that you have.
Really great point.
good point.
Joshua, do you feel like your question was answered?
Yes, I guess there's still some questions of like how much of the code and stuff you can avoid. It seems like it's almost the same doing like for like versus not if you're still subject to all the same, code, like you need to put fire sprinklers inside your house and stuff like that.
Don't avoid things that are going to make your home more safe.
Okay.
That's what I would say. If your house is going to be more resilient, isn't that what you would like? I think that as long as you can afford it. I mean, all of our houses have to have fire sprinklers. And we have hardy board on the outside, not wood, because that's fire resistant. There's all kinds of things that is going to help you be safer.
Yeah, that wasn't so much my concern. It's more of like, if I want to go bigger than 110% because we are rebuilding and take advantage of that, how much longer is that going to take and how much more is it going to cost? You know, not necessarily, you know, can we avoid being safer?
Right. I guess it really depends on the scale of what you're trying to do. I think it's kind of hard to answer that without knowing.
So maybe for the 110%, is that for tax exemptions and to speed the process, or is it just for tax and, you know, as long as we're getting plans, they're getting approved for Altadena? Is that more the question, Joshua?
Yeah, actually, I had heard that the tax was 20% larger
Same.
from someone in the assessor. So I was like, oh, well, if we can go up to 120% and they're, you know, it would still be expedited, you know, how much harder is that?
Yeah,
That doesn't sound unreasonable.
No.
And the other thing is, they said the same thing to us, that if you did the same thing, it would go faster. And guess what? It didn't go faster. It wasn't faster. It might have been faster by 1 week. I mean, seriously, it was not faster.
So,
Okay, it
so
wasn't faster.
there's no such thing as building permit expediting. It doesn't go faster, but it can sure go slower. So that's why you want to educate yourself. Earlier, Lydia mentioned Epic LA. Epic LA is the County Department of Public Works website, and it is a trove of information, including FAQs and primers and notifications about what to do. I would encourage people to create an account in Epic LA so that they can find a way to track their permitting and their building along with their builder, and to familiarize themselves with all of that public information on ADUs and structures and the planning process, and you know, see what they have to say. It's probably been improved a lot since the fire, because so much of it is being you know, being put out there for the public. So I would definitely, you know, avail yourself of all of the information that's available online from Department of Public Works.
Mm-hmm. Joshua, do you have any follow-up questions before we move on?
No, you can go and move on to someone else. Thank you.
No, thank you. Pam asked, is Altadena going to set up a dedicated rebuilding permit office, which I believe is yes. The location I've not heard of. However, I've heard that it's in the works. Is that fair to you?
I'm sorry.
I personally don't know. I mean, I think I saw something like that.
Yeah, I don't actually know where it is.
I don't think it's been set up yet, but I believe it's been floating around a lot of town hall meetings. So hopefully that it's something in the works. But as of right now, there's not an address or a site yet.
I saw a question come through the chat about these meetings that I mentioned this Thursday and Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Those meetings are probably full. I mean, I'm not an engineer or an architect, but I signed up. But by signing up, I'm going to, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to get a link, and they're going to have some edited video summaries of what was discussed about what the potential new codes are, what the strategies are for expediting these permits, and so on and so forth. This is the first of a series of meetings we hope to have, sort of like a primer, if you will. And as we learn more and we move forward, we can share that knowledge. So I'll take that link and whatever I hear there, and then we'll push it out into the community so everybody has a chance to see what the building officials are saying, what local architects and engineers have in terms of, you know, strategies and ideas on how to make this go faster and build it back better.
Yeah, so for people who would like emails, again, there's a pinged, or I should say a pinned community form at the top of the chat. If you prefer to get emails, please fill it out. If you prefer to get updates from beautiful Altadena, stay as you are. And as I get information, I will try to email and post it on that Facebook group until we have a more robust system of communicating I'm going to stop at the 7:45 questions on the chat. Sonia, your hand has been up for some time. Do you want to ask your question to the group, Sonia?
Your microphone's off.
Yeah, you're muted if you're talking. All right. Well, if not, just unmute and say your question out loud. I'll move on to the next question. I think we talked about this because it's from Margaret. Did you address the issue of 2-year displacement coverage for not lasting long enough? Any other thoughts on that? I would think many folks wanting to rebuild will be in that situation.
Yeah, I guess my question, I mean, you addressed it earlier, that's problematic for a lot of people. I mean, I'm sure there's creative problem solving. I mean, for us, I think it's very likely that our property displacement money will be exhausted in 2 years. And looking at the timeline of some of the case studies, it doesn't seem really, it doesn't make me think that, I don't want to be disillusioned to think I'm going to be back on my property in a year and a half.
Yeah.
Pam, did you have experience with people in your community getting, and I'm not saying that this is a solution for all, but Pam, did you have experience with some getting trailers from their insurance? I've read about this from previous wildfires. Do you know of anyone that had that experience?
FEMA provides trailers. So then you would live in a trailer camp provided by FEMA. That's possible. You can take your ALE money and buy a trailer. You can use that money how you want. I recommend not using that money to go buy a bunch of temporary furniture. Sometimes people do that and it's not so wise because you need that money. I know my husband thought we should just have inflatable furniture for the 2 years we lived in a temporary house. I was more into getting the Salvation Army loan, or whatever. But yeah, save your money for your house as much as you can. Another one is, I know there's different generational houses and relatives. Like you may have 5 family members who lost their houses, right? More than one house. So my friend Lisa, her house burned, but her mother's house also burned. In order to build back better, they only rebuilt one house. And they sold the other lot and they built a house, and the mother, it was elderly anyway, so she lives with them. I mean, you're going to make decisions for your family that make the right financial sense for who you are today and who you are going to be in the future. To think creatively about those sorts of things. We did have ordinances, like you can't live in a trailer in my neighborhood normally, but they did allow it. There was a temporary urgency ordinance put through that allowed it temporarily. After a certain date, you couldn't do it anymore, and that was it, okay? Because we didn't want our neighborhood to be a trailer park, so no more. There could be official things that say, yes, you can do it, so.
Hi, this is Sonia. Hi, thank you. So my question was, I'm sure if you're familiar with the Altadena area, like I had a natural water flow in my basement. And yeah, it's from the mountains. So you had to have a pump that drained it. So I'm sure it's probably overflowing right now, but I was wondering if you knew if that could be re-engineered when we rebuild.
Yeah,
I would
probably.
presume so. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want that.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
It was a 1948 house, and
Yeah.
that pump has been down there forever.
Wow.
And yeah, so you do think that could be re-engineered, because that's definitely what I want to do.
Definitely.
And
Yeah.
aren't have you guys seen in the past certain insurances might be able to cover upgrades to the home like that in a state of emergency like this? I feel like I was talking to you about this, Jordan, but maybe not. I don't know if you had any experience, Pam, of people whose homes survived, however, may needed to be modified for either fire resistance or things like this, and the insurance might be able to cover.
Yeah, your insurance is a contract with a company, right? You have an agreement of how much money they're willing to reimburse you for things. You have to convince them that you're worthy, that you need it, that you had that damage. Sometimes it takes a bit of convincing. Advocacy. That's where United Policyholders has scripts for that. They have examples of it. They can tell you how to get the most out of your policy that you can. So UPHELP, uphelp.org, definitely. And if they have meetings in your area, go to them because that helped us all immensely. But
I've got some input there.
yeah.
This is Lynn Pham. I'm sorry I entered the meeting late. I was talking to another client on the phone and I couldn't get off the phone. So anyway, just to let everybody know, I've been working with a lot of fire survivors and I work on the construction side of getting estimates together to help them get to their policy limits to get those paid. And I also do a lot of consultation work for people who are rebuilding and I prepare estimates so that they can get fully paid for their code coverage and everything like that. So I'm actually pretty well versed in what is required for code. And so to answer your question, they will build back your house to code. So if you have a drainage problem that can be corrected with drainage, well, when you rebuild a house, they're going to want you to properly slope your house. They're going to want French drains at the foundation of the house, and they're going to want those drains to lead to either a dry well or to be connected to the sewer system. More and more cities are not allowing the drainage system and the rain drains to be connected to the sewer system, so it goes to a dry well to naturally drain that way. But usually if you're rebuilding a house like that, then your sump pump goes away because you're going to take care of the foundation and the moisture that was entering your foundation at the perimeter. Now, the only reason you might need your sump pump to go back is if you have an artesian well underneath your house, and that's just groundwater, and then no, you can't get rid of it. But that's why you have your civil engineers and you have people to go out to do tests for your soil. So they do address all that. So when you tell them, hey, this is an issue I had because my house was 1948, then that will key your engineers to plan something to address that. Okay. And so it's the code portion of it is going to be the drainage, because if your original house didn't have a perimeter French drain, nor did it have did it drain the water away from your house, therefore it is collecting under your house, then the drainage actually falls under code.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sort of. I would just like to get rid of that pump, but
that'll be up to your engineer.
You know, when the electricity goes out, that was always a pain.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I'm assuming everyone understands that there is a bucket in your insurance policy for code, like to satisfy code.
Yeah, code upgrade.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to look for that one. My policy's pretty good. Mercury's been very, very good. Thanks, Lynn. I'll check into that. But again, I'll just pray to get rid of that darn pump.
Yeah.
It's also the case that part of the plan check process goes through the grading department, and they're very sensitive in the planning to make sure that water is not draining into your house and that water is draining away from your house. Mm-hmm. So that's gonna help just to keep your house out of a pit, so to speak.
Okay,
I wanted to, yeah, go ahead.
My other question was that the lady who was talking about the ADU converting, well, she actually had an ADU
did you brush
already
your
done.
teeth? Enza, did you brush your teeth?
The ADU, does that add more square footage, and does that create an issue if you didn't have the ADU in your garage, but you decide to create the ADU so that you could move in there like she was doing as well? How does that work?
When you add square footage, you add to your tax base. So
yeah. Right.
The way this would work before a disaster is, let's say you had a house and it was 1,000 square feet, and you put an addition on 200 square feet. The county assessor would continue your property tax basis on the original 1,000 square feet, but they would assess the new 200 square feet at the current amount. So you would have a two-tiered property assessment. In this disaster, the assessor is saying as long as you are rebuilding to less than 120% of the original building, then we're going to keep your tax basis the same. If you build an ADU that's in excess of that, it becomes a new structure. It's taxed at the current rate separately. But your old house, when you rebuild it, will maintain, as long as it's within 120% of the original footprint, will maintain its original assessed rate. That makes sense?
Okay. Okay. So then, for example, what I was thinking is that the garage itself, let's say it's 700 square feet, right?
Mhm.
If I convert that garage to an ADU in itself and not have it be a garage anymore, then I'm not going to be reassessed. True?
I did a garage conversion last year, and it was converted to, it was a garage workshop. It was converted to an ADU, but the garage workshop had previously had an occupancy, so it was not reassessed. I think the county, and someone who knows more should jump in. I think the county looks at different use functions and assesses them differently. So a garage, since you don't live in it, is assessed at one rate as an accessory structure. A house that you do live in is assessed at another rate. If you build an ADU, it's living accommodations. And
It's a house.
It's a house, right? So it's assessed at the same rate as a house.
Yeah.
It's actually to kick my 23-year-old out of my house, but
That is a very common reason why people want to build ADUs.
okay. Thank you. That was it
I
for me.
wanted to make a point here about your ash removal or your cleanup. Many insurance policies have this dedicated value for debris cleanup.
Mm-hmm.
And the colonel at the Army Corps of Engineers was at pains to point out that if you take that cost and you use it to clean up items not in the ash footprint, like tearing down burned fences, cutting down trees, scraping 2 inches of ash-laden soil off the rest of your property that the Army Corps didn't touch so that your kids don't play in toxic ash in the future. Keep your receipts, because if you expend your money in your policy on other items for cleanup, the Army Corps isn't going to take it. They will take the unused portion. So
Right.
if you don't spend that money, the Army Corps, through the county, who you gave your insurance information to when you opted in, will take that benefit to pay some portion back to the federal government. So use your policy to its full extent. Spend that money on ash cleanup and other things. Otherwise, it's just going to go to the Army Corps at some future date.
That's really good advice, Jordan. So I have
Keep your
seen, and I have helped a lot of my clients through the end stages in trying to recover some of that debris money that was paid off by the insurance company. So let me give you guys a real live example. So my client gets a bill for $140,000 for debris removal, and the insurance company, at that point, they're underinsured. They put everything that they were paid towards their construction. So the policy then has a bonus coverage they call additional coverage for debris removal, and it totals 5% of your dwelling coverage, 5% of your other structures coverage, and 5% of your contents coverage. Now that's a bonus coverage that only triggers when you blow your limits. Okay, so if you go over your limits for the dwelling and other structures, but you don't hit it for contents, you don't get it for the contents portion. But if you do, like most of my clients, we blew past all the limits, then the insurance company, once they get that FEMA bill, they will issue a payment to FEMA. Okay, now back to Jordan's point. FEMA will only remove the debris within the footprint of your house, of your original house. If you have a detached garage, if you have fencing, if you have trees at the perimeter, if you have retaining walls and ornamental rock, they're not going to remove any of that. So you're going to be responsible for removing that yourself. So as you are removing it and you're doing it yourself and it's outside of what FEMA left you with, then you save all those costs. Even if you're doing trees, just write down and you've got rented your own excavator and got a chainsaw, right? Even if you're removing yourself, keep track of your rental equipment and your time. And then when the insurance company pays that 5% out and they send that check to the county, then you write a letter into the county. You say, oh, hey, by the way, I spent everything, I'm underinsured, and I had to spend this much out of pocket to remove this other debris that your contractor did not remove. And then at that point, if you make the request in writing, once they cash the check, they will consider reimbursing you that amount. And I've had clients that will reimburse the entire amount. And that's the key of keeping that done. Now, I also was able to prepare an estimate from a demo contractor, and we submitted the estimate instead of invoices to say, hey, look, we don't have this money, but if I were to hire this contractor, he charged me $40,000 to come in and do the remainder of the debris removal. And on the basis of that, the county was able to release that money once they, checked everything out and looked at your insurance payments and your breakdown that they'll ask for your settlement, because they want to make sure if you say, hey, my loss has exceeded limits, they want to see paperwork from your insurance company to verify that. Okay, but once you pass all that, there's a chance you can get more money back.
That's super helpful. And we need the money back. So we're at like about 4 minutes. I'm going to ask one more question, and and then I'll show the source data that people can use as a resource. And if anyone wants to stay, if our experts can stay on the phone for the additional questions, let's see how long we can do this for. So go ahead, Frank. Do you want to ask your question? If not, the next question is, should we have any concerns about the county changing zoning, single family residence, etc.?
I think Catherine Farger, county supervisor, has made it abundantly clear that she's going to put her foot down, not only to developers, but to housing activists who, for one reason or another, feel that Altadena should turn into an ocean of apartments and, tightly packed areas. She has, I believe her statement was, everybody's right to rebuild their home is non-negotiable. So that's pretty tough talk from somebody who, has 2 million constituents, and I take her at her word. I think she's been very consistent in that message, and that's what she's told the county to do, and the rest of the supervisors have said the same thing. So I don't think rezoning is necessarily on the table. I hope not. I hope everybody is able to rebuild their home and reestablish their community and move on with their lives. Altadena is a very special place. It's a very special community, and I think the County Board of Supervisors recognize that.
Yeah, and I haven't seen that happen in any other community. They have not enforced anything like that to change the zoning. But what they have done is they encourage people to build ADUs, because then they can fulfill some of the high density requirements or lower income type of housing. So that actually gives homeowners more freedom to do so, because before that, some communities are very strict. They don't allow ADUs.
Yeah, the county already had a policy of encouraging and streamlining ADUs for exactly that reason.
Perfect.
Totally. So I'm going to just try to jump into this last question. Even if we rebuild, will insurance be available to properties that are now considered high risk, high fire risk? how much consideration should be determined whether or not to build, or the timing of getting permits filed is kind of like a twofer. So Pam and Lynn, like in your experience with the Tubbs fire, did people, once people rebuilt, did they have problems and issues getting insurance, especially to cover fire? Because in Altadena, even just 4 months prior to the fire, people were getting dropped from their insurance. As it is today, I mean, what is it like getting insurance for fire coverage?
The short answer is yes. It's a big problem when you own a house in a fire danger area. These carriers are actively looking to cancel those types of policies. Even if you rebuilt your home and you don't have any more clearance, it's the fact that you're in that zone that they will punish you. So I've got clients who called me up and said, Lynn, my insurance went from $2,500 to $12,000 to $20,000. And I can hardly afford this. So it is happening.
Yeah, and that's a political situation. It's very hard to tell you, but I do have friends, not in Coffee Park actually, but I have friends who live in a little bit more rural area who could not get insurance.
Yeah, and it's actually preventing some people from buying houses. They would qualify for the loan, but then once they find out that their insurance is going to cost them $2,000 a month, then they don't qualify anymore.
My niece lives in the Hollywood Hills and she could only get the FAIR plan. So
I was going to say, how does FAIR plan figure into this equation?
yeah, I mean, that's the last resort. It doesn't cover everything.
Yeah, FAIR plan basically is there as the emergency, and I can't buy any more insurance. So it is very low insurance. So once you have it, you know that if you did have a fire, you're not going to have enough money to rebuild. They limit coverages.
Would a lender recognize it?
Well, it's enough to cover the lender, right? They don't want to shut down the real estate industry. So that's what FAIR plan is. But any of your equity is gone.
Very scary. That was a really great question. So we're 1 minute over, so I'll just shout out to anyone that might need to drop. I just put a link for another form just so we can get feedback on the survey. Also at the bottom of the chat box, you'll see there's a share project rebuild Altadena. That's the presentation, and if you wanted to click in it, it's also on the invite. There are a ton of sourced information that we provided today. I want to get back to questions. I think that's way more important, but I will say for people who are really interested in the rebuild process, Rebuild LA Architect has a great roadmap with a lot of detail. And then we also talked earlier about the vetting a contractor questionnaire. And then also in the chat, the UpHelp, I think are going to be some really, really great resources. So for those, I mean, there's so many people that stayed on, so it seems like some people have the time. So I'm going to go back to questions. And so as I'm scrolling back up, I'm going to try to find my place, but I did see a question regarding, is the 110% based on a floor plan or like the square footage of the house, I think it was. Can we just define what the 110% means?
That's where the county will look at what the assessor records show and what any previous permits that might have been pulled, like the original permit to the house and whether there was an addition that was permitted.
Okay, great.
So that's that.
Rob,
I want to emphasize that not only going to the building department, but the assessor's office is really important, because the building department only sort of formalized their record keeping in the early 1950s, and a lot of structures only existed in the assessor's office prior to that. So I've encountered situations where I'm trying to find out the genealogy of a building, and the building department doesn't have it. But I go over to the assessor's office, and there it is. So it's really unlike other building departments where they put everything from the beginning of time onto their records. The county still has these two different buckets of information. So if you don't find the information you need in the county, you can go to the assessor, and then there's more data.
Got it. I think this was from Rob. Did you, or I think it was Rob. Did you have any other follow-up questions on this one, Rob? If you're still on the line. All right, moving back to Margaret. We canceled homeowners insurance after the claim was filed, of course, and switched to renters insurance while we do not have any property. I feel like a lot of people have this question. It's like, now that they just have land, like what are they paying for in their insurance if it's most of their structure is gone?
That's a question that varies per carrier, because some carriers, when you call your agent and you tell them that, hey, can we back this down? Then some of their agents will say, well, let's not change anything because we don't want to risk that they cancel you. Okay. And then others will say, you know, let's just keep a liability policy on your property. And then once you start rebuilding, then call me and then we'll start giving you coverage for the dwelling again and other structures. So, you know, that's a huge money saver, because for the next year and a half, 2 years, when there is no structure and you haven't started rebuilding because you're doing your whole architectural planning and plan permitting process, then you can save yourselves a lot of money by doing that. But you have to call your agent to see if they're willing to switch your policy over to just the liability only policy. You definitely don't want to cancel your policy, because then the challenge is going to be to get another carrier to, you know, to insure you again. So that's the biggest danger is, you know, if you have a decent policy and you're not paying crazy amounts for premium, then you want to do everything you can to keep that policy in place.
So then if someone has a mortgage, have you seen in your experience that the lender's okay with them only having liability?
Yes, because what's the mortgage there for? It's for the structure, it's for the house, and the house is gone, then it doesn't matter. Now, if you have a forced policy, one that is through your lender, then you might have a harder time, you know, getting them to fulfill that request, because then you'd have to get somebody at the mortgage company to cooperate.
Well, again, I feel like maybe we jumped too soon. I did talk to our agent and she advised us to do this. She advised us to go ahead and cancel and get renter's insurance. And we talked to our public adjuster. He said that was fine. So I'm feeling, and we did contact our mortgage company, they said that was fine.
Okay, again, if you can restart with the same carrier when you have your house rebuilt, then it is fine. But if that precludes you from getting more insurance because now that you are in a fire danger zone, you know, you might have a hard time getting that same policy, because, you know, a renter's policy is nothing for them. They don't hardly pay out anything at all. So of course they're going to say that's an easy one for you to purchase. But will getting a regular homeowner's policy again be easy to purchase when your house is rebuilt? That's the main question.
Yeah. Also, too, you know, it seems like this is, Jordan, you said this earlier, it's new for a lot of people. And so we're really learning as we go. So really interested to follow up with you later, Margaret, to see what your agent says. Do you have any other follow-up questions on this one?
No, I think I'm just going to give her a call again. I feel, kind of frustrated by this.
For sure. I'm going to send her some. Yeah, I would be frustrated too. I'm sending you some positive energy.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to wish all the phone calls tomorrow go well.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Our next question, and I'm like just so impressed by everyone that's still on the call. We still have like majority of people on the call, so thanks for trugging through this with us. I would like to keep my basement. Is that possible? I heard it would be really complicated to fill it, and I would have to wait for the ground to settle. Jordan or Lydia, what do you guys think?
Well, your insurance company owes you to rebuild the house back the way it was. So if you had a basement before, they will build it back with a basement. But then now that's where Jordan might have some input. Is there going to be any changes within the building department that disallows that? I don't think so, just because, if you properly build a basement, you're going to think about drainage, you're going to think about sump pumps and, things that you have to do at the front end to keep it out. And so I haven't heard of anybody saying, no, basements aren't required anymore. You have to fill it. More, it's a cost limit, So, for example, if you are underinsured by 30%, and then it's like, oh, geez, that's our basement. If we finish out our basement, then that's going to be our 30%. Then you may decide, okay, I can't afford to build back my basement.
I would also emphasize again that if the concrete retaining walls and foundations and slab are removed, there is still a grading operation. So this is a big thing that I'm trying to convey to people, which is that it's not a normal fire where it's like it burned down and then some guy comes in and he just reframes it and puts it back and cleans off the smell. This is something fundamentally different. And when we come to a construction site that's never been built on before, we have to build this engineered earthen pad for the foundations to sit on. And if it's a basement, it's a deeper dig. And you actually recompact 5 feet beyond the perimeter of the proposed structure, so that you have something that's sitting higher than the surrounding landscape, that the bearing zone of the future foundations are founded into competent soil. And if you have a basement or if you're on a hillside, that's part of that grading operation that has to happen before you can start excavating and putting in new foundations and walls and drainage systems, etc. So I don't think they would not allow you to do that.
Right. You can do it. It's just the cost.
It has costs. Yeah. Again, I think a lot of this really points to everybody educating themselves as much as they can and coming up with their own personal strategy on how to navigate this, as Pamela has described. It's like maybe you let the basement go, maybe you have to, or maybe you keep that basement, but something else gives.
Mm-hmm.
I would also like to add that, part of making a house more fire resistant is to put it on a slab. So if you had a raised foundation with a basement, then you might want to consider putting it on a slab instead of going with a raised foundation.
Interesting. Tosh, does that answer your question? All right. I see 2 hands up. Susan, oh, so go for it.
No, yes, it does. Thank you.
I just want to give an example of that slab versus pier foundation, an example of how that played out in our meetings with the city planning office, because people were, first of all, you had to be educated. Well, what's the difference? We didn't have any basements here. Nobody had a basement, but which should it be? And then people were just choosing one or the other. And the city did not foresee how suddenly some houses were, front doors were up and some were down. Like our houses are right next to each other. There was this a little bit weirdness. They had to come in and really make some different planning rules about the elevation of your house. So it's not like sitting up a lot higher than the one next to it. Anyway, unforeseen things. Mm-hmm. So yeah. And so then they made a rule later, because they didn't know that was going to be a problem. They never imagined it would be a problem. So.
Got it.
Awesome. Susan, I see your hands up. Did you have a question?
Okay, the question is about the Army Corps of Engineer. You know, they're removing the foundations, and I was at our property, which we were, you know, we enter at ground level, but we had below grade rooms and a garage underneath the house. And there's retaining walls, but I'm not sure that I got clear understanding. Are they taking away retaining walls? Because if they do, what about the integrity of the soil and everything else that those walls were keeping up? That's my concern with how much is Army Corps going to do. Are they going to put up any shoring or anything else if they take that away?
They're not going to shore anything, and they will remove the foundation wall if it is within the footprint of your house. If the retaining walls are away from your house, they won't touch them.
Yeah, the retaining walls are holding up the floor above.
Then
So-
they are going to remove that.
Yeah, that's
Well,
part of
that's
the
kind of
structure.
scary, though.
Well, most of these foundations aren't code compliant to today's codes. So,
Right.
so they're probably going to force you to dispose of them anyway. There was actually one gentleman in Coffee Park that demanded to build on his existing foundation, and he never got it properly tested. And once he built his house on it, the city came back and tested it and said, nope, it's not acceptable. He had to tear out his house.
Oh yeah, I get that with our concrete, you know, because the integrity of the heat and all that,
Yep.
the concrete's not the same. But if they're going to come in and take, you know, the retaining wall goes below grade. If they're going to take that away, and there's soil that is holding up. So my point is it going to be like an attractive nuisance? Is it going to be there that the soil's going to cave in? I mean, if they're going to take away the footprint and even the vertical portion, then what's going to be there to keep it in place?
Yeah, I would
Nothing. You're
think
going to
that-
come back to a pit. You're
Wow.
going to come back to a big pit. But when your civil engineer looks at everything, he's going to plan new piers and he'll take care of all of that. What they build back is going to be better than what you had. But
Right.
if your question is, will the Army Corps of Engineers try to save my foundation? No.
No, I get that, but I was just wondering how much of it, you know, as I said, our house is 1928.
Mhm.
So we had slab on grade and there was retaining walls. And so if they take away all, so you're saying it's going to be a big hole with nothing. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah,
Then
and
it's
then-
holding up half of our landscaping and our grass. So,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, and so when they're done, they have disturbed that soil, and they're not going to do the recompaction I'm describing that would be needed in order to build a structure or even a retaining wall on it. So, you know, when they pull those foundations out, the soil underneath is no longer as it was the day they built it. So you have
Right.
to actually dig deeper, recompact it. You have to do a certain process of benching the soil till you build back the walls, and then you waterproof, put in your French drainage system, backfill it. That's all part of the civil engineering and construction process. But the Army Corps is just basically pulling it out, scraping off the top 6 inches, hauling it to a toxic disposal site, and walking away. So that's what people should expect.
Okay.
Lydia-
Thank you.
Lydia, did you want to add to that?
No, that makes sense. I mean, I would think that they would leave the retaining wall if it's actually retaining dirt. But I don't know for a fact. It
Yeah.
sounds more like what Lynn knows more about that than I do.
Yeah, they're not very careful. You know, I had a
No, I know they're super aggressive
Yeah.
about it, but
Yeah.
I know
even when my clients requested to meet with the foreman and say, look, I really have, you know, things that are important to me. You can remove this, but don't remove that. Oftentimes the communication doesn't come through, the contractor or their foreman doesn't show up. And then the homeowner comes back and finds that everything was done the way they wanted it done, and they were pretty upset about it.
yeah.
So if you're lucky enough to get a responsive FEMA contractor and you know the foreman and you make yourself heard and you have a connection, and then you can time when they're going to start the demolition with a meeting, and then you can ask for specific things. But just keep in mind, they have a mind of their own, and they are more concerned about the safety of their crew than whether or not you want to save a particular tree. If that tree gets in the way of their debris and it poses a danger to their crew, Doesn't matter what you say, they're going to remove that tree.
Right. I just want to say though, in this particular case with the retaining wall, removing the retaining wall is potentially more dangerous because you're allowing all of that dirt to come.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
but even so, I'm thinking that's why I was thinking that they would leave it. But just so you know, that retaining wall is no longer viable though. So it will.
Right. I know. Yeah.
It will have to come out.
That's
But
what I'm saying. Because
yeah.
as I said, the retaining wall and the slab have to come out, but then it's going to be a big old 14 feet or so of soil just hanging by itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Susan, a good plan might be to get your civil engineer out there sooner than later and have them weigh in on it. And then when you talk to the FEMA guys, you can preface it by saying, my engineer told me this. And then that way they can give you your voice some more credence. You know what I mean? Because now they hear that another engineer has weighed in and requested that stay, then that is more than just your wants and desires. It's a professional opinion.
Because I don't mind them taken away, but typically they put some shoring up to hold it, in
They
place.
will not shore it. It's either remove it or not. I've never seen any shoring been done by FEMA contractors.
Okay, thank you.
You might want to shore it after they're done. But that would, and you can use your FEMA money to do that. That 43,000 payout. But yeah, basically what they're doing is they're disturbing, by ripping out all the foundations, they've disturbed the landscape. And until it's put back by, an engineered compaction process, then it is what it is. Either just if it's on a flat surface, it's just loose dirt. If it's on a slope, it's unstable. They do work on a safety basis, but that safety basis has a lot more to do with the safety of their crew than it does with the site. You are allowed to be there the entire time if you so choose. You can just be on site while they're doing it.
Got it. Susan, any follow-up questions?
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank
That was a really interesting one. Trisha, I see that your hand is up. Do you have a question for the group?
Hi, I just have a question with the person, this is the person who has the basement, and they were saying, can we rebuild it? If that basement, it was considered part of the square footage of the house, the assessed value, and you're not able to build it, or it's too expensive to build it back as a basement, would you be able to go up instead, like add a second story to get the same square footage?
I'm waiting for you, Lydia.
I know, I'm thinking, I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, what they told me was that they'll allow you to rebuild your square footage. So,
was the basement considered habitable
not
area?
usually, not normally, it's not, but
You may have built it out, but it might not have been considered by the assessor of the county building department as,
it,
habitation.
yeah, I really don't have an answer for you. I mean, that's kind of one of those questions that it's worth talking to them about. I think that it's not really straightforward.
By them, it's the planning department.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's also budget driven, because remember, your insurance company doesn't care if the space was permitted or not. They will pay for what was there. So if your basement was fully finished and your main level was fully finished, then they will pay you what it costs to rebuild your house. Now, during the planning process, you find out that, hey, it's actually cheaper for us not to rebuild the basement, but to go with a slab. Let's just fill it up and then build a 2-story, and it's less costly to do it that way. Or if it's even Steven, then that's the determining factor.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's I don't know if you guys had this, Len, but for us, there's a 110%. You can build up to 110% of what you had, and so it'd be nice to know if, like, for Trisha's example, if that if that would be like another 10% or that's just within the 100%. So that way she's in that range. But it sounds like the best solution is to go to the planning department. Is there any other comments or maybe some other ways to look at this?
I think to Lynn's point, what your insurance policy settles for and what the county allows are not necessarily the same thing.
For sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the other thing is it that you're not allowed to build more, or you're just going to have to pay some higher taxes on that percentage extra? Because
You
that's
build more than, yeah, you're correct. You build more than 120%, then you lose your current tax basis. This was an effort by the part of the county
right.
to not penalize people who had a low tax basis because
Right.
they lived there for so long by rebuilding a home that just burned down. But if they're going to like double the size of the home, all bets are off. That's a new house.
Correct.
Right. I didn't have to, mine was a little bit more, but I didn't have to pay the new tax basis on my entire rebuild, just so you know.
That's good.
Yeah, as I said earlier, you know, if you just like did a room addition, you'd keep the tax basis of the original structure. You'd pay the new tax rate on the new addition. So probably some kind of, standard will be held to that as well.
Awesome. Tricia, did you have any follow-up questions?
No, that was it. Thanks.
Thank you. Not sure what the name. No, go for it.
Lorraine, at some point, I have a couple things to say about chimneys and fireplaces, but I want to get the answers to the questions. Okay.
For sure. We have another hand raised by GCC. If you're talking, you're on mute. All right, I'll go to the next question. And if GCC, if you get off mute, feel free to ask your question. Joshua's back asking if the homeowners will be responsible once the Army Corps is done with the removal for a topographic survey. I don't know if that's required though necessarily to rebuild, but
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I recommend getting a boundary survey at least. If your site is on a hillside, then you'll need the topographic part. But if it's relatively flat, then you'll just need the boundary survey to show, and they'll add stakes so you know where your property line is. But you could also do it with your neighbors so that maybe there will be some cost savings that way.
Mm-hmm.
They could do them all at the same time.
I know that on a flat lot, when I had to take the plot plan to the grading department, I was able just to simply annotate it and just put arrows where the flow went. And they accepted that because it was a relatively flat lot. They just, the county likes the building to sit 8 inches above the adjacent grade. And they want to make sure that if there's water flowing across the property in a large rainstorm, that it's not flooding the property. And if it is, you're going to have to put in some drainage system to conduct it around. So flat properties are, I think there's a little bit more of a grace than on slope.
all right. Joshua, do you have any follow-up questions on that one?
I guess what qualifies as a flat property? I mean, I think all of Altadena is on a pretty gradual slope at least.
Well, this was a gradual slope, but they didn't make me do a topo. They just said, okay, as part of we were doing again this ADU garage conversion. They were like, you need to tell us which way the water's going. So I just no, well, I think it's going that way. and it worked out. I mean, it wasn't really what we would call a hillside property, but it was sloped, and they just wanted to check off the box that if the water was flowing on the property, if it hit the perimeter of the structure, that I had a drainage system to conduct it around the perimeter and drop it on the downhill side.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. The next question is from GCC. How long is the compacted process?
Not very long, depending on the size of the building and whether it's on a hillside, because hillsides are always more difficult. But what they're doing in that process is they're taking essentially 5 feet of soil out, and they have to kind of dig it out a big hole and throw it off to one side. And then you get a geologist looks at the bottom of the hole and he says, yeah, that looks good at the bottom, and he signs a paper. Then the contractor, using water and heavy equipment, recompacts by rolling a bulldozer over it, essentially, and every 6 inches. And the soil engineer checks it again just to make sure that it reaches this 95% relative density, where you add some water and the water fills the little voids between the earth, and then you compact it really well with this heavy equipment. A compaction operation like that on a flat lot is usually just about a week, because it's just a bulldozer moving back and forth and calling the soil engineer back to check it every 6 inches. You know, it's not, you know, it's not typically a very long process.
So apparently I'm GCC. I didn't realize I was GCC. My name is Kate. Yeah, I'm on a relatively flat lot.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying then that I can start building after about a week?
Well,
or I should say laying the foundation, right?
Yes, if you have a permit, and you know, there is a grading permit that precedes this, right? So you can do grading and compact and leave what we call an engineered pad with certified fill there, and it can sit there for years, and you can sell it as an engineered pad, or you can build on it. But essentially, under normal circumstances, if I'm building a new home or if I'm building a commercial area, the minute we're done with the compaction and the engineer signs the compaction report, it gets sent to the grading department. We start digging foundations. So it doesn't take long. You know, if they're expediting, the grading department has to, quote, approve the compaction report, which is just the summary that we dug it out and we filled it, we compacted it, and the soil engineer signed it off. It's usually a 2-page kind of thing. And if they're expediting, there shouldn't be anything that stops you. You know, if you have a building permit and you've compacted it and you got your EPA approval, and you know all the toxic stuff's been taken where it's supposed to go, you can just start building.
Great, thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Kate. So those are all the questions in the chat. I wanted to address a question that came up in email, which is, can we review the benefits and disadvantages of going with like a block by block getting a builder? So like, let's say one full block decides to go with one builder. What are some of the positives? What are some of the negatives that come with that?
If I could just mention from my Coffee Park, no HOA. Everybody is their own property owner. Good luck with that. Because you are not an HOA, that everybody on your block is going to agree to have the same builder. I could never imagine that this would happen. Now, however, though, there may be a builder that comes, and that happened to us, that offers a very affordable deal. It's exactly the kind of home that people there want. And they might build 50 houses in your neighborhood, but they're not all going to be on the same street. I mean, really, I can't. Lynn, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, to get that kind of consensus, I saw it happen in a development by one specific builder, because he was the original builder. So he wasn't retired yet. And so he had a meeting with all of the homes that he built because he lived in the neighborhood. And even with that, not everybody opted in. Somebody, some people would say, no, I'd rather have my friend build it or something like that. So it wasn't 100% participation, even with that very same builder. Now, there are some other options. I've heard that one of the builders in the Santa Rosa area that actually was very successful, and they built very solid and pretty affordable homes. Christofferson Builders may decide to come down. And the unique thing about them is that they do tract homes, production building, and they also do semi-custom homes and custom homes. So they looked at their plans that they have built in the past 30 years, and they picked out 29 of their most popular plans, and they put them all through the building department at one time with new engineering to get them all approved. So when their customers came in, and they were from everywhere. They were from Coffee Park and up the hill and everywhere. They would come in and they would pick out one of these 29 plans, and they would save themselves 6 to 9 months of architectural and engineering. And the cost went down from, sometimes you're looking at architectural on the cheap is 25,000, and on the expensive you can spend 200, 300,000, right? Well, they were selling all of their plans for 22,000. So that's saved not only time but cost. So that was a very successful model that they had. Now, once the homeowners chose a plan, they could still change out the finishes, right? If they wanted granite this and that, they could still do all that. But they limited their people to not moving walls around because those plans were already pre-approved. That was a really good plan, and it saved a lot of time and it saved a lot of money.
That sounds like that could work for a lot of people.
Yes.
Is there any disadvantages or any? I hear getting everyone on board is going to be difficult, and you might always have that one person that doesn't want to do it. But did you guys find any negative experiences or any just call outs we should be aware of?
No disadvantages. I mean, like the one neighborhood I told you about with the one contractor that was offering to rebuild houses for everybody because he built the originals, that worked out really well because then they were able to roll from site to site to site and mobilize at different times, but they were weeks instead of months. And so that actually worked really well with his flow because then he could plan it based upon those who signed on to say, yes, we want the original builder to build it. The only con that I could think of is just a consensus with everybody on what's to be built back.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if there's HOAs, if there's shared costs or something like that, if there are any common areas, parks and sidewalks and stuff like that, that would be a con, because if you weren't in an HOA, then that means it's the city that's responsible for your roads and sidewalks. But if you were an HOA, then it's an assessment that you'll have to pay extra.
On that note, there is an area that was hit by the Tubbs fire that was outside the city limits and had sewer. It was not, it didn't have sewer. Mm-hmm. And they took the opportunity, because the whole neighborhood burned down, to organize to actually go on sewer. And it costed each of them money, to get that. But a person who worked for the water agency was one of the people whose house burned down and was able to orchestrate a lot of that. And so I don't know how much of Altadena is on septic or sewer, but
a large percentage. There's a lot of people who are still on septic in Altadena.
Yeah, I myself have a septic tank.
And guys, just personally, I've been on septic and I've been on city sewer. I would have my septic system back any day because I'm not subject to all these taxes and all these, increases in my sewer fee. I literally had to pay once a year to get my sewer system checked, and it was $400.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So that was like a question from someone over email that I'm not sure if they're on, but that seemed like a pretty answer to me. So those are all the questions. If anyone on the call has a question that they didn't put in the chat and just wants to throw it out, feel free. We have Stephanie, go for it. If you're talking, Stephanie, you're on mute. Adam, do you want to go ahead? And Stephanie, we can't hear you. If you want to write your question in the chat, I can read it out loud for you. Adam, did you want to ask your question?
Yes. My question is, if we're allowed to keep the same setbacks that we had originally, for example, my home was built in 1926, which is not the current code. Do those code violations that do occur by keeping that same setback, would you be beholden to that?
Yeah, they'll allow you to keep them.
So, for example, windows. And so what they were saying at one time is that you couldn't have additional windows because you were too close to the property line.
Yeah,
So,
that's good. Yeah. Yeah.
so
yeah.
were we allowed to keep put those original windows back in some case?
So they said yes, but I mean, this is one of those opportunities to make your house more fire resistant. And I mean, the reason they don't want windows there is because you're so close to the property line that a fire that starts in your neighbor's property could come over onto your side, and a window is the first, that and the vents are the first line of attack. So that's why they don't want windows there. So
yeah, but there would be a problem because like the whole south side of the house would not have windows.
yeah.
In that case. And there's a lot of properties like that.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. It's a problem. So they will allow you to kind of change the shape of your house, keeping the existing square footage to increase the setback so that you could be a little bit more fire safe.
But the other problem is if you increase the setback, so say like the setback is 10 feet, but basically you're shifting the house over, the problem is there's a setback on the other side.
Yeah, you have
the north side.
Yeah, you have to adjust both sides.
How narrow are the lots typically in your area, Adam?
Well, it depends. Like a lot of lots have been subdivided. And so like lot sizes could be like width could be like 98 feet. But the problem is some things have been subdivided and sometimes they have flag lots in some fashion.
Yeah.
And so if you're shifting your house over another, 5-10 feet, then on the other side of you, on the north side of you, you're too close to the other property line on the other side of you. And so there's nowhere to shift if you were to shift
I hear you.
based on those things. And so those are the types of problems that a lot of us are going to have in this area.
You might have to build narrower and up a story.
Would that be considered in the same like for like footprint then?
Probably not, but this is again one of those questions really for the planning department or an architect, because it's so specific to your specific area that it needs to be looked at in a more holistic way. It's I can't really say.
There was a house in Portland that I was a part of. I was doing the estimate for it, and the owner kept me in the loop with all the planning process and everything. And I actually sat down with they roundtabled the plan review process. And he had a duplex, and the problem was the city requires 6-foot setbacks on either side of the house, 15-foot setback from the sidewalk to the front of the house, but they didn't have any requirements for the backyard. And the house was actually two feet too close on one side, and we couldn't get a variance for it. So the city said, no, we're going to stick to our 6 foot to either side, but we'll allow you to build it longer.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, but then sometimes, like in my case, even longer is too close to the property line. So literally on all sides, the original home is not to current code on
Yeah.
all sides. It's
I
north,
know.
south, and east.
Yeah, I think a lot of Altadena is going to be like that. I don't know. I don't have an answer for you.
How is
unfortunately.
the city dealing with granting variances if you're trying to build back what you had? I think that's a question for the architect to run by the city.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'll ask the county the next time I'm over there. I'll definitely ask them.
I was like literally talking on mute. Stephanie, it seems like we can hear you now. Did you want to ask your question?
Okay, my question was regarding septic. You're able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Going back to septic, we are on septic. Half of my street is septic and half is sewer. Unfortunately, I'm on the septic side. My question is, what's the likelihood that my system, given the high heat of the Eaton fire, what's the likelihood that my system has not been compromised? Do I even have the option of keeping my septic, or am I going to have to replace it again because of the high heat? Is it probably going to be damaged?
The heat will damage your lids, but it shouldn't damage your leach field nor the septic tank. But the problem is, if you're going to have contractors come in to demo your house, that's heavy equipment that's going to be moving over those leach lines, and they're probably going to break. So on all of my properties that we had rebuilt with septic, the leach field had to be replaced, but the tanks, they usually stay pretty solid, and the lids had to be replaced. Now, if half your street is sewer and the other half is septic, the city may step in and say, nope, now we require everybody to be on sewer. So that's a question that the building department will have to settle for you.
I have reached out to the county and we started that conversation. It's very early in the conversation, so I don't have a definitive answer. Yes, they will or will not do it, but we have started the conversation.
Good. Yeah, you're going to have to comply with what they say.
Okay.
I'm also aware that they've slowly been, adding sewer, so that everyone can connect to the sewer. There are properties that were previously had septic tanks and fields, but are now connected to the county sewer system. So I know that's probably their preference.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions lingering out there? All right.
Okay, if there are no questions, there's something that I'd like to pass along to everybody. I know I sound like I've been kind of hard on the FEMA people with their lack of cooperation and communication, but that is still the biggest benefit the federal government is going to give to you. So I recommend to everybody, opt into the FEMA program. Now, they may be slow, they may not communicate very well, but here's the benefit. If you opt in, you're not going to get a bill for 2.5 to 3 years. Okay. If you hire a private contractor, as soon as he's done, he's going to hand you a bill. Okay. And before you accept, you have to kind of get him to bid it and then find out what your policy pays out for the debris removal to see if you can afford it, because, the biggest benefit of the FEMA program is they will accept whatever insurance money that will pay on it. So doesn't matter if your bill is, let's say your debris removal money is 70,000 and the bill is double that. Well, they'll accept the 70,000. But I've seen FEMA bills that are 400,000 or more. So it's a huge benefit.
I would also add that the removal process is still a toxic waste removal process, and it requires all the bells and whistles that are normally done. That means that there's air monitoring and that there's carrying cost of taking the materials to a toxic waste dump. It has to have a chain of custody that goes along with it. Your plan has to be sent to the Air Quality Management District for approval. Then when you're done, you have to close the loop and get that approval and get it all over to the county. And this in competition with the Army Corps of Engineers, who is tasked with removing the foundations and cleaning the lots of over 12,000 structures. So you're muscling into a very large machine, and the resources that you need to complete your work go well beyond just the guy who's going to, dig out your foundations. It's all of these other entities, and they're all being contracted and scooped up by the Army Corps because they're going to give them contracts for thousands, hundreds, or thousands of lots to do this on, as opposed to you coming there with just your one lot. So, you might be trying to put yourself towards the front of the line. It's much more likely that you'll end up at the rear.
Yeah, but that being said, I've seen quite a few homeowners with private contractors, and the private contractors are subject to the same testing requirements and monitoring requirements and disposal requirements too. So again, vet your contractor. Sometimes they will get the work done much faster and much cheaper. Most of the time, actually, when you compare it, because think about it, what contractor can carry a bill for 2.5 to 3 years, right? That's a government program. That guy's not waiting that long for his money. He's getting his money up front. So those bills are inflated. So, but again, if they're not going to hold you to their full bill payment, then you opt in with them. But there's going to be some instances where maybe you've got plenty of insurance. Maybe you bought a premium policy and you're not underinsured. So if that's the case, then the debris removal should fall within your coverage. So in that case, then you may opt to go with a private contractor. But first, know your policy, know what it pays. But most people are underinsured. So that's why my recommendation is to opt into the FEMA program.
One more thing too, Lynn, and you can weigh on this too, is when you do get some money from your insurance company, you should set up an escrow account, a separate protected account for that, so that you can use that for drawing down and paying those different fees.
Yes, that is if you own your house free and clear. But if you have a mortgage, your mortgage company is going to grab that money and they will set up an escrow account.
Right. You have to, depending on your situation. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. All right. Last call for questions. All right. Well, I really, really want to thank our panel and our expertise on the call. Pamela from the Tubbs Fire, thank you guys so much. Your guidance is not only so much needed today, however, I know we're going to be working a lot in the future, so I just thank you for all the future help. And then Lydia and Jordan, our local engineer not engineer, sorry, it's been such a long day. Our local licensed general contractor and architect, thank you guys so much for your input. I see that one more hand is raised. Erica, did you have a question?
Yes. Can we receive a copy of this video so that we can review it later?
Yep. So for anybody who signed up for our community forum, which is pinged at the top, if you want an email, please fill out that form. If not, I believe a lot of people have heard about the event on the Facebook group Beautiful Altadena. So once I have that posted, I will post it on that group on Facebook.
Okay, is that the one at the very top that says community forum if you want to be connected with an expert?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I already completed that. And I thought that that's what you had stated in a little while ago in the beginning.
No, yeah, it's a great follow-up question. There seems to be a lot of interest of even people that have attended have messaged saying they want to review it later. So we will put up the recording, email it, and post it on the Facebook group.
Okay, thank you so much. It was very informative.
And then there's also a meeting survey. I'm sorry to ask you guys to fill out so many things. We just want to make sure that if we do another meeting, whether it's with us or just a different organization that we'll probably link up with, we just want to make sure that we're presenting information that's needed and in a way that's understandable and accessible. So thank you for filling that out, Erica. We still have so many people on the line. Thank you guys for hanging in there. This was such a long call. And I know we've been inundated with like so many town hall meetings. So for the fact that you guys were able to stay on for so long, I really, really appreciate it. And I hope this brought some hope. I hope this brought a lot of knowledge. And I'm very excited to see us rebuild Altadena. Oh, thanks, Pam. Okay, well, I hope everyone has a great night. Hopefully we all talk soon in the future. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Lorraine. Bye-bye.
Night, guys.